My name is Al Kath. I live at 2033 South Jackson Street in Janesville, Wisconsin. I originally lived out in Emerald Grove. My folks, they migrated from Germany before 1900s. They were married in 1901, and we had I had four brothers and five sisters. They're all deceased now except me. I lived out in Emerald Grove till the age of 18. When I come home one weekend and I had a beautiful letter from the United States government that your friends and neighbors have selected you to represent the U.S. Army in a war against Germany. At that time I wondered what kind of friends and neighbors I had. I thought they were a little better than that, but after all, things had to be done. I went to high school in Janesville, Wisconsin, the old Marshall Junior High School. I graduated there when I was 17 and a half years old. I went into service when I was 18. I met my wife prior to this time here, and after I had gotten into service, we were married by proxy and had a son by the name of Richard in '43.
Not in 1943, you didn't.
I was officially entered the service of the United States government on May the 13th, and my official signing in was on, or March 13th, my official signing was in on March 19th of 1943. It was a rain and blustery day when we left Janesville, headed for Fort Sheridan, Illinois. There is where I had my first taste of the United States Army. They run you through a line and gives you one size of clothes fits all, whether you like it or not. Clothing that we had on, we shipped home, and I was there for a couple days, and they were starting a new division, the 106th Infantry Division, of which I later joined up with. They put us through rush training due to the fact that they needed replacements over in the European theater, and my training started out at Fort Sheridan, and it was further along down in Fort Jackson, South Carolina, where we had maneuvers and them great 25-mile hikes with a 25-pound bag on your back and a 9mm rifle which weighed 9 pounds. When you got through with the march, your arm was about down to your knees and ankles from carrying that rifle because it was so heavy. I had further training down there, and I ended up in headquarters battalion to start out with. Later on, they needed a little experience in the motor pool, so I ended up in the motor pool. From there I went into the 589th Field Artillery Battalion, and I was very, very good at all of the guns and equipment and that, due to the fact that when I was very young I learned to hunt and that out in Emerald Grove. And from there I ended up as in the 422nd Infantry Anti-Tank Battalion. This I stayed in until I was out of service. Well, after we had our rush training down in South Carolina, we were going on maneuvers down to Tennessee. At this time, they had high floodwaters and that down there, and after cadre was on march and that, we loaded up in the vehicles to go back to camp, and somebody said that there was a couple guys on top of a Jeep in a swollen river or creek bed from a flash flood, and they couldn't swim, so I went over a hand bridge, hand over hand, to get there, and fell off once in the rushing water, and finally got back up on there and got across the bridge, and I went over there and I got them two guys off the top of that Jeep, and for this here I was issued the Soldier's Medal. Another camp which I come back to, I ended up back in Camp Atterbury, Indiana. That picture there of me saving that guy down there in Statesville, Tennessee during maneuvers was taken up in Indiana. And I was held back from my regular unit. They shipped out of there to Camp Miles Standish out in Boston. But later on I caught up with the unit and went overseas with them from there. I left on Pier 13 out of New York Harbor, and I also come back on Pier 13 when I come back from over across. And that was the training in that, they run us through, I forget just what they call them now, under the barbed wire and that, them, with large rifles and that shooting over your head and that, make sure you didn't get up, you know, or they'd probably plunked you. That's that. It was followed by a submarine, German sub, for 3 days out of New York Harbor, and we zigzag course and finally got out of that, and we ended up over in Europe and England. We went down to Southampton is where we really ended up at. We had our base there, and the weather was really bad and cold, stormy down in October, November. Well, we had some training there, and then from there we shipped off across the English Channel, 22 miles of real rough water, and landing craft infantry, they call them LCIs. Well, then you hit the beach and the door comes down and they unload you like a bunch of cattle, and you take off to beat hell to get on the land. But sometimes you probably wish you'd have stayed on the boat because the weather was all mud and sloppy over there in France, and we had to pitch our pup tents on the ground and try to bargain with the French people to get some straw to put into them to keep dry. Now, we didn't have any training there, but we lulled around there for a while, and due to the fact that they needed help up on the line, we went up there in October and went up at nighttime, and you could see all the trees and everything that the Germans had zeroed in on the roadway with 88 millimeters, and they popped all the treetops off and the poles and that. Well, anyway, we ended up on the line, and I was with the 422nd Infantry. We replaced the division up there that had been up there, and everything was supposed to be real quiet in that, but the Germans had pulled a lot of their troops and their big tanks and that back from out of Italy and that, and had placed them up there for their last big drive in the Battle of the Bulge to try to get down to Antwerp, with the idea if they got down there they would have a bargaining chip with the government to try to save their hide. Well, we was there for about 2 weeks, and we were sniping back and forth, and the weather was so bad we didn't have any air support, and we was finally getting low on ammunition and no food, and we finally realized takes you back a ways.
Well, take your time, Al.
We finally realized when the chow wagon didn't show up one morning that things were starting to roll. Well, at that time the Germans started to move out, and we exhausted all of our ammunition, so we was relayed by headquarters to try to get back to St. Vith, which is down in Belgium, which was the headquarters of the 106th 422nd. Well, on the way back, we could see the Germans going parallel along the line with us. Well, they're being out of ammunition and that, they finally caught up with us about 4:30 in the afternoon, and the old man that was in that head jeep, he decided to take a road that was off of the main road, and he run in the minefield, and it blowed the leg right off the first sergeant that was driving that jeep. At that time I got shrapnel on that. It's harder than I thought it was going to be.
That's okay.
We had no medics or anything, so we used a first aid kit that we had in that. Well, finally we had to give up because we couldn't go any farther, and of course the Germans, they said, for you the war is over. Well, that we knew. So anyway, they rounded us up, and we marched, I don't know, it was either 6 or 10 miles that night yet, and we stayed in churchyards and that, the weather was 40 below zero with 3 foot of snow on the ground. They took our overshoes and our gloves and everything away from us. And anyway, I loaded into boxcars, and we was in those boxcars for 6 days without anything to eat or drink. And they took us and they sidetracked us down on outside of Limburg, Germany. That was Camp 12A, and we was in there till the 23rd of December of 1944. The RAF come over and skip bombed the boxcars. They blew the doors off, blew some of us out of the cars. Some of the guys, we opened the boxcar doors that never got blowed open. They tried to escape, and I tried to get them rounded up to come back because the Germans were just shooting them, trying to get away. And in the camp there at 12A, there was an officer's barracks that was hit by the RAF that night, and killed 69 of our officers there. So, let me take a breather.
Sure. Hang on a second.
Okay.
Anyway, in this camp here, we did not have anything to eat, and this was being on the 23rd of December, just a few days before Christmas. We had sauerkraut out of our steel helmets. Stomach being empty, that wasn't too great of an idea because we couldn't hardly get the latrine, such as the latrine they had is a split trench with a log across it to hang your butt over to do your job. Well, after being there for a couple of weeks, they decided us to take us out of there. So we started on a march of 100 miles, so we ended up 20 miles south of Berlin. Well, during this time of our walk, they had political prisoners in that, they're Jewish people, that was on one side of the street, and they were marching them to the crematories and that. And they were just in black and white uniforms that resembled pajamas and wooden clog shoes, and if they get out of line, they would just shoot them. And they had a guy behind them whipping them with a whip to try to keep them up. But every now and then, one of them would drop back and let somebody else in line to take the whipping and that there. And I don't just remember how long that march took, but the only place that we stayed was in open churchyards in the cold winter, and we used to rotate from the center out to try to keep warm for the night. Well, we had about 3 or 4 sessions in the churchyard. During one of the marches, the United States Air Force come over, and they were going to start strafing the unit. But then we went off in the ditch and made a sign of POW out of human bodies, and they took off. Well, one night we happened to stay in a barn, an old horse barn, and that had a little straw in it, that had chickens in it. And we got out of the weather that way for a little bit. Well, the next morning we got up, and they said that somebody stole one of them glass chicken eggs that they used to set an old chicken on for setting to raise young. Well, they lined us up outside in a row and said, well, somebody stole a glass chicken egg, and we're going to shoot you one at a time till we find that chicken egg. Well, they farted around there for a while, and we finally left it. I don't know whether they ever found a chicken egg or not, but anyway, we was on the road again and marched through some of the small villages and towns there, and the little boys, they called them Boy Scouts, but they were young Gestapo. They were in little black uniforms. They'd spit at you and throw stones at you and that. And the SS troopers, they were the worst individuals I've ever seen. We never really had too much contact with them, but they just as soon shoot you as look at you. Well, anyway, we finally got to our destination in Luckenwald. That's 20 miles south of Berlin. And they didn't have any barracks. The barracks had all been filled up there, so they pitched circus tents in a big old field on the edge of what used to be a garbage dump there. And good thing it wasn't in the summertime, or we'd have been stunk out there because that cabbage rotten. People know pretty well what that smells like.